it's been a while since we've talked about MrBeast on this channel, but unfortunately, we have another reason to talk about him. Very recently, like a couple hours ago recently, Rosanna Pansino posted an interview that she had done with someone who had suffered a traumatic brain injury on the Beast game set. Now, this traumatic brain injury comes from her getting checked by another dude, where she gets knocked out and presumably potentially trampled, and that's when she gets kicked in the head. But keep in mind, this injury is so severe that the full recovery to it is looking to be September of next year. On top of that, due to the injury, she hasn't been able to return to her work. And to top all that off, it is so serious that she has taken it to the Las Vegas Police Department and made a report. I'm just going to be giving you guys some of the highlights from the interview about, important subjects like what had happened, the repercussions for it. I think she really touches on a few good things. She also did a TED Talk about free choice, which is, very useful for some of the conversations we've had in the past about this, and a lot more to cover. But before we start the video, just a quick 10 seconds. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing or just giving the video a thumbs up. But regardless of if you do either, thank you for watching. Now, the woman's name is Amanda Rose, and they start off the video by having a little bit of a chit chat and getting to know each other. This intro might seem unimportant, but I just want you guys to really understand that this was someone who was on the side of, they really respected Jimmy, they really respected MrBeast and the company, and they came into this very excited. Like they were, straight up auditioning for the Beast games, and they had a lot of respect for everyone going into this.
So I did this great little pitch video because I'm actually a PhD political scientist, and long before the Game Theorist YouTube channel was founded by one Matthew Patrick, mathematicians for years had been using game theory, and economists, political scientists, sociologists use game theory in their own research, and I had used it in mine. And so my pitch video to Beast Games was, you need a real game theorist. You need a PhD game theorist on the Beast games. But this started when he was about 10, and I would get I would meet up or, find them in the hallway or whatever it was. I went to Vid Summit in September of 2021. I went up and I got a photo with him, but he was standing next to Jimmy Donaldson. And so they then did a little video together with a shout out to my son.
Now, Amanda posted on her YouTube channel with the video from Matt, Pat, and Jimmy saying hi to her kid.
Alistair.
Hey, Alistair.
We just wanted to say hi real quick, even though we don't know who you are.
I was going to say, I'm sorry that you can't be here in person at Vid Summit, but you get the next best thing, even something better, a personalized MrBeast and Matt Pat video.
There you go.
This is like the third collab that we've ever
exactly.
done.
We're going to go do another Christmas video.
Third collab right here. This is exciting.
All right,
and this is all for you.
So again, just establishing that she was a big fan and also, had met Jimmy through Matt Pat, just getting a general understanding of, she's been around them before. And then the other part of kind of exposition that I want to show you is her talking about the fact that she was mic'd up for the Beast games. This is a point that I'm going to be referencing later on, so I just think it's important enough to include it here.
And I was mic'd by the producers. There were story producers at Beast Games that identified, 40, 50 contestants who were probably like the good storytellers, I would imagine. The story producers actually came up to me. It was 3 or 4 of them, and they came up and they said, "We know your name. You're Amanda, the game theorist."
Love it.
Now, there's some incredible stuff that I will be skipping over because it isn't pertaining directly to, the Beast games. For instance, she lost 140 pounds in a year, which is absolutely incredible. But I want to jump over to her story about the events that had unfolded when she was at the Beast games. She makes mention of the fact that some things should have caught her eye earlier, but they just didn't because, she really liked Jimmy. She liked MrBeast and the company. So she brings up the fact that it seemed very disorganized. And she also makes reference to things like the medication issues that we had heard about where people weren't getting their medication.
So when you first arrived, what was your experience before the game started?
The signs were all there, Rosanna, in the very beginning, because the day I was supposed to fly to Las Vegas, I was supposed to fly out of Fresno to Las Vegas, and we were supposed to get a 2-day advance on what our itinerary was. And I was supposed to fly on a Tuesday. Well, Monday night at midnight, I get my itinerary, except it's not mine. It is for a woman in Indianapolis. And so as a result, I don't know if she ever made it, but I didn't have an itinerary. And so I immediately emailed them saying, what's my itinerary? And it was supposed to be the next day. Didn't hear back. I went to sleep and woke up that morning and thought, if I don't hear anything by 9 a.m., I'm just going to drive. It's a 6-hour drive. I'll drive. Yeah. And I didn't hear anything. And so I emailed them again and said, hey, I'm driving. I'll see you there.
What a mess.
Because at that point, they did tell me what hotel I would be in. And so I just, Google Maps and, headed to the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas and showed up, was the only one parked there because everyone else had flown in.
To me, this already shows disorganization, just even with basic travel.
And now looking back on all of it, just how ridiculous all of this was. But I was so dedicated. I was just so dedicated as a contestant and as just like the super fan mom living in this great story. And I'm going to overcome all adversity, even if it's jumping in the car, and finding the Luxor myself and not worrying about that flight or whatever.
Now, not only do I think she lays out some really good groundwork in talking about the fact that, I think a lot of people that go and participate in the Beast games or even other content creators that work with Jimmy kind of have this air of, well, it's MrBeast, it's this company, or even, the contestants that have just, heard of it and, a bit starstruck with the fact that they're there. They're going to kind of ignore these things that normally you'd kind of think, oh, well, instead of getting my flight, I have to drive 6 hours or I'm screwed out of this opportunity, which is a crazy opportunity for most people. So again, I think she just does an excellent job in just, giving us a bit more of a looking glass into the mind of someone who is super excited to be a part of one of these things and is just completely blind to a few pretty bold red flags at the start.
But I drove myself back with a concussion because
oh my gosh,
I didn't actually realize I had the concussion until I had driven myself back.
Oh my gosh.
I was still in the adrenaline of the games and didn't imagine I had a concussion. I had no exit medical care from the games, despite the point that probably dozens of people saw me actually kicked. No one referred me to nurses or to the ambulance or anything else. I didn't know I was kicked because apparently I blacked out momentarily. And so I just drove myself home because what else would I didn't imagine I was injured.
So when I was going through this, hearing this no exit medical care, I feel like there's going to be two sides. Number one is you're going to see here in a bit how she's going to talk about how she ended up interacting with other individuals and reacting to the situation of her falling to the floor, losing consciousness, getting kicked in the head from that. She doesn't necessarily immediately give off this, I've suffered a traumatic brain injury, because she's not, passed out for a couple hours. She's, talking to people, interacting. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, how could they possibly know that she had a concussion if she was behaving this way after she had gotten up? And I think the other side of this is going to be the fact that she had reported to multiple people that she got pretty much knocked down to the ground, which was also, I believe, against the rules of the game. But on top of that, she was one of these storytellers, which I had referenced earlier, and there's a very good likelihood that they would have caught it on camera, her getting hit and falling to the ground. And if they didn't, that's another issue with, how this game was produced, but that's kind of just leading down a huge rabbit hole. But yes, just so we're clear, she drove home 6 hours with this brain injury and very easily could have injured herself or somebody else on the road, and thank goodness that didn't happen.
And I was ready for hardships. I mean, I have hardships in my own life. I've overcome a lot of hardships. And so the first morning, we were in this hotel conference room with no chairs. We're just sitting on the floor. And we hadn't eaten.
Right.
And so we just sat there on the floor, no chairs, no nothing, for hours. And,
oh my gosh.
and yeah, it was not the best in terms of like being hosted or whatever, but I felt like that might have been intentionally part of the vibe of getting us ready for something that would be grueling. Like, okay, I'm here for it. They fed us our first tiny little meal. Oh my goodness, we could talk for hours just about like truly the food was austere. And even for me, but for some of these bigger guys, it was kind of ridiculous, but part of the game, maybe. By then, I think we went to sleep at about 6 a.m., so it was daylight, and they gave us sleeping masks so we could sleep in these sleeping bags on the floor of the stadium. I probably got a few hours of sleep, and then we kind of woke up, strolled around. That was the phase when there were a lot of people not getting their medications. I was definitely aware of people, firsthand in there who were actively trying to get their medications and were not able to get them. Luckily for me, none of that impacted me. I don't take any medications and I was fine. And so sleeping on the floor, it was not a big issue for me. And so I was still in really good spirits about all of it, still really enjoying just meeting people and discussing, just having that shared experience with people. And everything was good. at that point.
So a few important things about what we just saw. Number one, and I think the most important thing, is that everything that she's talking about and confirming in terms of events like the not a ton of sleep, the seemingly bad quality of the food that was brought out, or the lack thereof, much food for most people. And then of course the reference to the medication not being given to the people that were, trying to get their meds. These all line up with testimonies that we've heard from other anonymous MrBeast contestants from the Beast games, or also, stories we've heard from employees. So just for the sake of giving credibility to one story over another, it seems to be in line with what we've heard before. But not just that, we also, again, she reaffirms and talks about this fact that even with all of this happening, there was always a way to kind of, justify it in your head. Oh, it's going to be grueling. Maybe this is on purpose. We're sitting on the floor, going into sleeping bags with sleeping masks, getting a couple hours of sleep. It's the atmosphere. It's the vibe. This is intentionally what is happening because of what's going on. I'm curious to see if in the final show, they're going to showcase that or talk about the fact that they were limiting food intake, sleep, or medication as a part of the vibe, the atmosphere. Now, the challenge where Amanda was injured has to do with this briefcase game that they were doing.
Four teams of approximately 400 people each.
400 people each, about. Okay.
Yeah, because there were approximately 1,600 contestants at this phase of the game. There was essentially a game board that had 400 briefcases in a grid pattern. 50 of the briefcases had a sign in it that was red that said eliminated, and 350 said safe, and they were green. The trick was to get a green briefcase, and then you would move on to the next round. They put a digital map up on the wall for maybe a minute before the game, and then they turned it off. And then the digital map would flash up on the wall, and you could see where the green ones and where the red ones were. Because what you would need to do is mentally map those briefcases.
Yep.
I was assessing where on that perimeter would I have the least competition. Because I was looking at, there were some groups of, big, fast guys. Do I want to go in their area, or, how do I want to handle that? I knew I was probably stronger on the mental game than, I knew I was totally weak on the speed.
Yeah.
That's fine. Let the fast guys get like the closer cases. But I'm going to map 3, 4, 5 cases down the row, and then just go, and I'll get something. I'll be fine.
So that's how the game was played. And then another crucial detail before we get to what had actually happened, and that's that Rosanna and Amanda go over what the rules were for, the challenge that they were about to endure, like what people were allowed to do and what they weren't allowed to do, like shoving or pushing or, kinking someone in the head.
MrBeast says, no pushing, no kicking. What were the rules that he said?
Those are the only ones I really remember. It was like no pushing or tripping, kicking. It was either two or all three of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rule was we would line up around it, and on the word go, we would make a run for it. And whoever touched the briefcase first is the one who got it. Some people looked like they tied. They would go back to the camera to see who touched it first. So there were some little rules like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of me and my injury, what I didn't appreciate is in this grid, there would essentially be cross traffic. This is a very important point. I was not able to view the game before my round. So when people watch the YouTube video, they are going to see the camera view, like the overhead cameras, and they're going to have a really good view of what happened. And they're going to say, wow, how did Amanda not imagine that there wouldn't be cross traffic or whatever else? Well, yeah, it's very obvious when you're looking from above what is about to happen. I'm behind like some tall, fast guys. He says, go, and I'm just running my heart out, and I'm ready. I have it mentally mapped. And so I'm running, and I never saw it coming, because what happened was, just a few aisles down was this center corridor. Well, apparently what someone else decided to do was to run down and then cut in.
Run and cut, right. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm just running my heart out. And when I just feel the, I mean, it's just so shocking. And I remember that, like just my whole right side. And
you just felt that blow.
I felt the blow. And then I remember just, I'm on the floor and realizing I could be trampled. And so in my strong survival instinct, luckily, I scrambled up and I was able to get back on my feet. I kind of stumbled to a case, because at that point, it all happened so quickly. Everyone's at a case. And so
Chaos. Well, it's just chaos unleashed.
Yeah, and so I'm going down this aisle, and then I see a case, like over there, and it's just this one lone case, and I know.
So yeah, she's a bit delirious, ends up, being able to get up, and she finds a case. It's not one of the winning cases, it's one of the losing cases. That stuff isn't as important as what she's going to talk about next. Now, again, I'm including a little bit of extra just because I think it's important because, again, it goes over their mentality while they were doing it. And this wasn't the mentality of someone who was a sore loser. It was someone who was just happy for being there. And they're also really confused at this moment. It's just showcasing that Amanda is not this like scorned person who feels, like they need to get revenge or any type of thing. They were just happy that they were here and they still ended up going through all this.
Now, the thing is, I'm not a sore loser, any of that. I'm like, you know what? If this is the way it ends, so be it. I need to give my speech.
Yeah.
So they even have a speech that I gave there on the floor of that after being eliminated.
While you have a concussion.
It's really what makes it scandalous because I gave that, though, they're going to say, wow, she looked fine. Well, I'm sure I was in adrenaline or whatever else. And the reality is they had many people watching those cameras and they had me mic'd. The story producers were watching the mic'd contestants in particular, I think. And I told Carl Jacobs, hey, I just got knocked down. Check the tapes, because I was so much in my game that I said, what if when I got knocked down, what if I touched the case before that guy did? And he should be eliminated instead of me. And so I told Carl.
He should have. There's no contact. He should have not pushed or kicked you. That should not have been allowed. That guy should have been eliminated.
He should have been eliminated. So I told Carl Jacobs,
tapes, yeah.
Check the tapes. He said, oh yeah, we'll check the tapes. Well, he never came back to me. So when they checked the tapes to see if I touched the briefcase first, they, I think, would have noticed that I got kicked in the head. I didn't even know I was kicked in the head because, as an important point, I apparently did black out. So I remember the collision, like just the initial, and I remember being on the floor, and I know I scrambled up. And I remembered that there were feet at my head. And that is where that's when I'm like, better get the heck up.
So she notified multiple people. Now, honestly, Carl Jacobs being notified about something like this and then him going to say that to somebody, it's like maybe like it would make sense for entertainment wise that they go and check it back with Carl. But realistically, I don't know if he's one of those people that's going to be doing that. He's just more of like a face in these kinds of things. But she makes other really good points that she was mic'd up. She was one of these storytellers that she repeatedly, and she does go into it later, she asked multiple people. She mentioned to multiple people that she probably might not be out because if they go and check the tapes, they need to see who touched the case first. Not only that, but something else that she had mentioned talking about, hey, I had blacked out for some time and I remember jumping up. Well, that's also corroborated by the fact that when she went to the doctor, she's saying that they had also found that she had a bruised rib as well as bruised calves, indicating that she must have been hit multiple times or stepped on multiple times. One of two things happened. And honestly, I don't really know which one happened. I'm leaving it up to you guys. Make your own decisions with, your context clues, use your brains. But the two major things I see happening is number one, they just chose not to check the tapes because they saw her go to the one that ended up being a lost cause and they just didn't look into it. She got shoved over, whatnot. That's what they heard. Maybe a few other people in the 1600 ended up getting shoved, so it's not really a big deal, and they just kind of chalk it up to that. She seems fine. They kind of just, send her on her merry way, and because she seems to be, coherent and talking to them, she even did her little final speech. She must be all good to go. Send her home. The other option is they did look back at the footage, or they did watch. They saw what happened. Notice that she got back up, didn't make any mention of that. So, she clearly isn't in any discomfort, it doesn't seem like. And when they checked the footage, they saw that she didn't actually touch the case first. This other guy did, and she got up and went and grabbed the wrong one. In both these situations, quite a few missteps happened, but most importantly, in a show like this, if someone references repeatedly that they got knocked over, which number one is breaking the rules that were set before the challenge started, but number two, that they were shoved over, it should be your job as production to either investigate to see if someone had broken a rule, which, we already know how the MrBeast company views, people cheating. They actually end up getting first place. But on top of that, somebody getting shoved to the ground, especially someone who is, I'm not saying this to be rude, but someone who is older in age, although this lady does hike a lot, was a pretty hardy soul to begin with, they should still be checked knocked out by medical, like in some type of way, especially getting knocked over, something like that. If they looked back at the cameras and saw her getting stepped on or kicked repeatedly, someone should be like, hey, let's do the little flashlight thing for her. Just, make sure she's good to go. But none of those things happened. She did her exit speech and then she left. And keep in mind, she stops at multiple checkpoints, like at the hotel where they go through stuff. She's recognized by one of the producers. They take a photo with her to send to the other female producers. She makes mention of the fact that she got knocked over again and she hears nothing. And she gets in her car with this very severe concussion and drives 6 hours all the way back home. So you guys remember in Jimmy's interview with Oompa where they talk about that huge process where they emailed all of the contestants to check in on them and everything? Well, they bring up that talking point here with Amanda.
So one of the things that MrBeast production team said, they made a big point of it, is that they were going to review footage and they were going to go over contestants who were unfairly treated and bring back contestants that shouldn't have been eliminated. Did they ever reach out to you?
No, they didn't. And I did hear that too from them, that I think they sent out an email to contestants saying that basic thing, that they were reviewing all the footage. Now, I was so injured at that point, I would not have actually been able to attend the Toronto games. But I was really expecting to be invited because I was wronged. And I expected also to hear what they were doing about the person who kicked me because, they could position it as an accident, which I think would be somewhat fair. But in fact, they never have had any kind of conversation with me at all about this. And I was not invited back. But I want to say this, there were other injuries at Beast Games. I know personally of other people who were injured. And I suspect that many of them will not be telling their stories. And the reason is that we are speaking, this is a delicate situation. It's delicate, it's controversial, there are legal issues. I could speak out and potentially reduce the chances of future injuries.
Now, if this was just standard broadcasting, like, Survivor, TV show, that kind of media, there wouldn't be this, we're calling back the people that were treated unfairly to give them a second shot. There would already be a lawsuit. On top of that, again, yes, the fact that they never make note of the fact that the person that shoved them over did break a rule. Again, they could have gone with an accident like she brought up, but none of it is a conversation at all. And they don't even go back to her, which means that they looked back at the footage and didn't see that something had happened. Now, there is a world where she's faking this, where she's making this up, although it just doesn't make sense by any stretch of anything that she said that she would make this up. So I'm perplexed as to how they look at the footage, see that she's hit the ground and no follow-up happens, not even after the shove, anything like that. She even makes mention of this multiple times to different producers, but they don't get back. It almost seems like this point of reaching out to people is almost a bit performative. The reason I say it doesn't make sense that she'd be making this up is that her kid is a huge fan of these people. And the way that she has framed this up until, talking about actually going through the injury and suffering the consequences, she speaks very highly of them, is willing to put up with pretty much everything else that she had outlined, except for when she got knocked out. And even when she did, she's like doing her speech and saying, check the cameras. I might have actually hit the briefcase first. Come on, like, let me into this game. So for someone who at least portrays themselves as someone who's a huge fan of the content creators involved, specifically, Matt, Pat, and Jimmy, it just doesn't add up that they would concoct this entire story for a little bit of clout. They already lost 140 pounds and have a following from that. They don't need it from this. Next thing I wanted to include is just kind of her observation of what's going wrong from the inside.
The issue here is there's no oversight. And so all that a future contestant can really count on, or the information that I had was, for instance, there was a Time magazine piece in February where set safety was brought up, but then the MrBeast organization responded with, "Oh no, we work to improve that all the time." And then they have videos like the one with sometime in the last year with Mac and his greatest fears video, and he ends up in the lake, diving down in the lake, and MrBeast says, "Oh, if you were concerned about his safety, just know that we have like 12 divers down there and they were ready to rescue him if he needed to be rescued." And so those were some of the signals that I heard as a potential contestant, and I signed a liability waiver that yes, I could risk death, but I signed that assuming that they actually did tend to set safety, but there wasn't that level of care in the Beast Game set. I would think a dozen people saw the kick, and I had zero exit medical care. So the circumstance of the kick itself is unacceptable. I would say to them, I need to speak to a producer. Because I was trying to tell them, like, I just got knocked down. I need to speak to a producer.
Yeah.
Each
I
one
just
I was
got
saying,
knocked down. Like,
yeah, I was saying to them, I got knocked down. I need to, and they were saying, oh, no, we don't know a producer. But the point is, I told many, many people that I had just gotten knocked down.
right.
Now, to be clear, I didn't ask where the nurse was.
Now, the next big piece that I want to cover for you guys has to do with the fact that she did end up reporting this to the Las Vegas Police Department. And so they kind of chat about that, and it leads into some other really important points that I think she makes.
So one of the things that bothers me is when some people say, well, you were free to leave at any time. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. And that is really the essence of what I took to the Las Vegas Police Department as well. And by the way, everyone, Ro, welcome to my TED Talk. Seriously, I gave an actual TED Talk.
No, you did. Oh my gosh, you did.
On this topic about a decade ago, and it is about the concept of free choice. And so, but let me first back up before we talk about the TED Talk, and just reemphasize that I did not have the information that other people had about the danger of the game board. Production assistants viewed it from the bleachers. We were not allowed to go into the bleachers to view it. We viewed the game from the floor of Allegiant Stadium.
Right.
And I'm 5'2", and I was, I don't know, a few rows behind people. So it's when you're viewing between the shoulders of people and you see a tiny slice of the game. And so I didn't see this risk of like crossways traffic and all that.
Right.
I simply didn't see it. And so it wasn't part of my calculus and my strategy. So I thought I could just like run freely and get that case and I'd be okay. That it was really a matter of being fast enough to get to one of these cases and being, like mentally sharp enough to be able to map enough cases that I was probably going to be fine. That was the view that I had. Of course, compare that to MrBeast's view as he stood on a pedestal above all of us. He saw the mayhem of the two games before mine.
Right.
And of my game and of the next game. He had a great view. All the cameras, they had lots of overhead cameras and they had people viewing those camera rooms and they would have been able to see the risk. Yes, I was free to be there. Yes, I signed a liability waiver, all of that. I absolutely could have gone at any time, but was this then an exercise in free choice? The essence of the TED Talk, this is a decade ago, and it's on an entirely different topic, and it has to do with the choice of raw milk. That just being able to reach for this milk versus this milk. But we need to know cognitively something about the difference between those choices. And so the information we have about those choices really affects whether our choice of raw milk or pasteurized milk is free. It's only free if we have enough information about the difference between the choices. Therein lies free choice. And so take that to Beast Games. And my physical ability to walk through that exit door and the fact that I didn't is it a sign that my concussion and my injury comes from my exercising free choice? Well, I argue that I didn't have the information about the risk. And in fact, it was kept from me because I was not allowed to view from the bleacher because I was told there would be no kicking and no pushing. That was the rule.
Right.
So color me surprised that I would be tackled in a game that would not allow tackling.
Right. Right.
So was it an exercise in free choice? No.
This point that she makes, talking about the TED Talk that she had done about free choice, obviously about milk at that time, but it has so much application to some of the conversations that we've had around a lot of the MrBeast drama. Specifically, I think everyone's looking back to the Jake Weddle situation where he was put in that isolation room and a lot of people were like, well, you could have stepped out at any time. It's important to note that even in that situation, Jake makes mention of the fact that the way that they talked about the situation was not reflective of what the actual challenge ended up being. And that lines up exactly with what she was talking about. I think she also does a great job at, making it clear that it wasn't like she was being dumb about this. It wasn't like she was just looking at it and was just going, yeah, I can't see it from up above, so, nothing's going to go wrong. Like, she was intelligently thinking about it, going, clearly this game, as they have it set up, if they're not, we can't see this from the bleachers, we're just making our assertion from here. I just have to be faster, and I just have to be a bit more intelligent and, know where those briefcases that are going to work are located, memorize it, and get to the place and just be quick. It wasn't like she just threw caution to the wind. She was keeping in mind and just making a logical conclusion based off of, what they were given. Except what they were given was not the entire truth. What they were given was what they could work with down there, while everyone, producing, Jimmy, could see from above that there could be a conflict here. And had she known those things going into it, would she have made the choice to stay? She argues that no, she wouldn't have, and that this isn't an exercise in free choice if they're not actually given an understanding. I mean, I would argue just like a basic understanding of the situation that they're in doing these challenges. And if you're not given the full context of that, then it's not really a free choice. Sorry if I'm rambling. It was just an excellent point that I think really is applicable to a bunch of other topics that we've covered. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. That's just kind of been my immediate understanding from that point, and I really thought it was useful for this subject. But moving on, we're now going to get into the full understanding of the actual injury. He's going to talk about the bruising of her body and really get into understanding the full breadth of what she's now going to have to endure for at the very least another year.
The injury was early Saturday morning. The drive back was Sunday. It was Monday that I realized I had a goose egg on my head, right on the back of my head. I had an abrasion. And the symptoms, besides the sleepiness that had come on that drive, by Monday, the headaches and the nausea began. And that is when I realized I must have a concussion. And so I went to urgent care and I was diagnosed with that and with a left bruised rib. They did an x-ray to see if there was any sign of evidence that it was broken.
Oh my gosh, you had a bruised rib?
Well, and I was kicked in the calves. So I had bruising on my calves as well. And then Thursday, I went into my primary care doctor and then began meeting with her once a week, I believe, for the first month. And she would do this concussion battery score on me every week. And it's what she does for her high school football players or, the high schoolers who are injured. And so we're doing this little concussion battery every week. And she was just giving me some of the general medical advice. It was at the 6-week point that I had that concussion score again, and it wasn't showing signs of decline as it should have.
Right. And for anyone who's watching or listening who isn't familiar with a concussion score, this is a score that a doctor, after you've had a concussion, to see where you're at, right? Is that how it...
Yeah, so this one was it's like a list of symptoms, and you rate the scale of severity of something like sensitivity to light,
right,
or loud noises. So there's a whole list of things that are common concussion symptoms, and you just rate them, and you're tracking your change over time. And so I had made some slight changes on those different things, but apparently not nearly what they would expect at the 6-week point. And that is when she ordered an MRI. So up to that point, I had not received an MRI, which, by the way, that's the key tool that they use to assess whether you've had a brain bleed. And the fact that I did not receive an MRI in Las Vegas, as I look back, I'm horrified, because that is when they identify a brain bleed, their concern, and the reason they try to identify it is you can die in your sleep. And so there I was for 6 weeks, not even knowing if I had a bleed. And then it took 6 more weeks of insurance bureaucracy before I actually finally got the MRI. And so I got the MRI at 12 weeks.
I think a good point to be made here is that it's not just to the benefit of Amanda or of anybody else who ends up having an injury like this on set during one of these contests. It's not just for their benefit. And so when we're talking about this, we don't just have to look at this from an empathy point of view. I think when a lot of people hear a story like this, the first, immediate response is just, that's terrible for what she had to go through. And I would hate to go through that myself. And so, yes, you can look at that and go, you'd expect that these people would improve, the safety precautions, et cetera, based on, they don't want this to happen to people. But I think it's also important to look at it from the aspect of this is just all bad across the board, even for the company. The company is going to suffer alongside the people that they end up making suffer, because you can't get away with just potentially ruining people's lives like this. You're going to face repercussions for it. And so it's not just for the benefit of the people that end up getting injured, although that's a great deal of it. It's also for the benefit of the company to take this shit seriously. And this is one of the few parts where she does get emotional because it's just finally hitting her. But she talks about that she was reached out to by a few, of the producers and whatnot to check in with her. At this point, again, it's just in those first few weeks. So she's not expecting that this is going to take, potentially a year, multiple months, etc. And it finally does end up hitting her that that is going to end up being the case.
And again, never imagining I would be sitting here discussing this with you and looking at a year-long recovery from a brain injury. And so from there, I got some general emails from the MrBeast organization like, hey, submit your tax forms, stuff like that. And they said they were going to be switching their communication system over and using a text-based system, but I never heard about that. And so I believe it was around September 1st that I emailed them and said, hey, did you guys ever set that thing up? Maybe I missed it because, I do have a concussion and might not be catching all your communications.
Yeah.
And I never heard back from them on that email. And then I sent them another email in mid-September kind of with the same flavor and didn't hear back on that either.
What were the symptoms you were experiencing?
In the first 6 weeks, definitely the persistent headache, nausea, and fatigue.
Yeah.
Fatigue has been the biggest thing for me in all of these weeks. I will say I felt like I was 80 years old and I could not recover from activity. There was a time, it was maybe at about the 12 or 14 week point where I went out and walked 2 miles, just like in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
2 miles, that's it. Now
Yeah.
in July, I was able to hike 10 to 15 miles, 2,000 feet elevation gain with no recovery problem at all. 2 miles, and I was exhausted for 2 days. Like, how you hear that about like your grandma?
You're like, something isn't right. Yeah. That's not normal for you. It's not who you are.
So devastating. So devastating. Okay. I will not get emotional. I simply have not been able to do what I could do. And the fatigue has been the biggest issue.
Now, I can barely get through a mile myself. So the fact that she was doing 15 on an elevation is nutso. And now she can barely do like truly a fifth of that. And that's 6 months after the fact. That is truly life-changing stuff. I like to play video games. I like to record and talk to people. And if all of those parts of my life got reduced down to me only being able to do a fifth of what I could do before, that'd be horrible. I'm pretty sure you'd have a case. Which again, I think is why she went to the police department. And I hope that does end up going forward. But coming up towards the end of the interview, she gets into more of, what she's dealing with now in terms of like how the concussion affects her and kind of like her cognitive abilities, which I think is pretty useful to touch on because based off of this video, she seems like she has, her wits about her. But I reached out to Rosetta Pansino's team and I was actually able to hear back. I'll throw the message up in front of you, but she had spoken for over 3 hours with them and had to take a ton of breaks. And then she also had to have her husband drive her the 3 hours over to Rosanna Pansino's location. But now back to the clip of her talking about what she's dealing with now.
And I shared my frustration with them that I have been very good at live videos and just really good at like juggling all the stuff you have to do in a live and just like cognitively.
It's hard. There's a lot of moving factors.
Fielding the questions or getting trolled. By the way, I love, bring them on. By the way, like bring the trolls. Silly. And so, it's always been great, but has been very difficult for me to like juggle the cognitive balls. I have a lot of cognitive lapses. So that not only is there the headaches, the nausea, and that sort of thing, which are going down, thank goodness. But one of the odd things or things that affect the live videos as well is I'll have cognitive lapses about 2 days ago. My son had a cheeseburger in his hand. He'd gotten it at school and brought it home. It was like school lunch. And I looked at it and I said, oh, what a good looking sandwich. What is that? And he said, it's a cheeseburger. And I stared at it and I couldn't imagine what he was saying. Like, what's a cheeseburger? I know. I'm so horrified by that, but it's just to give an example.
Could you imagine completing a PhD and forgetting what a cheeseburger is? That's insane. Obviously, it's an anecdote, it's a story, but like it really does tie into understanding that it is a really tough thing that she's dealing with right now. Like this is a very intelligent person that has had a concussion, something that, limits cognitive ability and whatnot and reduces it in some pieces. Being able to have this conversation, with the cuts that they've included and whatnot, but it really has become very limiting to her, not even just cognitively, but like she had said before, physically as well. The fatigue is insane. And now it's going to jump into the fact that she hasn't been able to work since she had this concussion.
Yeah. So it also is sounding like this has affected you financially. I mean, with medical stuff.
Absolutely, my medical expenses, but also my inability to work. And first, let me just say, I'm so grateful that, that I'm not homeless or something, that we've been able to just kind of get by in this circumstance, but I am not able to do the analytical work that was making the money. Like on the platform of Eat Like the Bear, the stuff that I had been doing, I am not able to do now, and I haven't been able to do. We are at our poorest that we've been in a very long time, but it is really our worst moment, I would say now, and it is directly, absolutely because of getting kicked in the head.
So I think that she makes an excellent case in the fact that pretty much all of this had to do with what had ended up happening at the Beast Games, which ends up pointing the spotlight onto the Beast Games yet again. Jimmy talked about in that interview that almost nobody was suffering anything outside of not getting proper feminine hygiene products. And I think this interview really does showcase the fact that there has been a bit of, I don't want to say sweeping under the rug, but clear ignorance of some serious situations. Jimmy was able to talk about the fact that someone wasn't able to get, a pad or a tampon in a proper amount of time because people didn't listen. But, let's just, be charitable here. Maybe no one told him that they had a grown woman get kicked in the head, get kicked about the body, stepped on from what it seems to be, knocked to the ground, who is now suffering some serious consequences, including an inability to work. Jimmy doesn't know about it, so I guess he can't comment on it, but I think it's more worrisome the fact that people either just chose to ignore it or genuinely did not notice the fact that she went through this, or the fact that upon follow-up from producers that nothing was done in follow-up. She repeatedly tried to reach out to them again. Nothing happened. I understand that, situations like this do happen, but she also references the fact that she knows about other people that were enduring it. She references the medication issues. I mean, realistically, I'm assuming that maybe more people are going to be willing to speak out about their experiences with Amanda getting this platform to share her own story. So I regret ever saying that any video I ever made was going to be the last video about MrBeast, because it doesn't look like it's going away. I'm interested to see if the company will end up responding to this interview, if they have anything to mention themselves, or if they can just release the raw footage that Amanda is hoping that they release. But until then, I just like to hear what you guys think about this interview. If you disagree with me or have a different take on this interview and some of the points that have been brought up, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to have a respectful conversation and discussion, although it's YouTube, so realistically that probably won't happen. But I'm much more interested in having that conversation and using our critical thinking skills to make an assessment of what's going on. And from where I see it right now, this interview makes the interview that Jimmy had with Oompaville come off a little more shaky and a little less honest. But I could be wrong. We'll see. If you stuck around to the end and you're new, consider subscribing or just giving the video a thumbs up again. I appreciate you sticking around to the end, but that's it. That's all I had for you. I'll see you later. Join my Discord. It's in a comment below. Bye. Goodbye.